is Jane Hawtin Live on WTN.
Hello, I'm Jane Hawtin. Tonight we're asking if you think it's fair that convicted batterer James Johnston must confess his crime to any woman he dates. Our guests are lawyers Mary Lou McPhedran, defense attorney Karen McArthur, and joining us now is Catherine Shelley. Catherine is a survivor of domestic abuse and a volunteer director with a Toronto women's shelter. Thanks for joining us. So what was your reaction when you heard, we heard that Karen did one of these, you know, a little cheer?
My instant reaction is, oh my God, how are they going to enforce it?
Right.
That was the first thing I thought of. I think that I agree that it's very creative. On the other hand, I don't think it goes far enough, and I support Mike, who suggested a registry.
Right.
I was appalled at one point when reporting a crime, going through mugshots and seeing a couple of people that I had been at parties with, you know, in there as having been convicted of sexual assault. I couldn't believe it, and I thought, my God, I might have gone out on a date with this person. I wouldn't have known, and that's a fine how you do. So I don't think this really goes far enough.
Well, since you've been through this, though, I mean, do you think it would work for you if you were starting to date a guy? I don't know, I guess we have to debate what a date is, but if you went out and had coffee with someone and they said, I have something that I have to tell you, I went to prison because I beat up my girlfriend, and then I can imagine the way that this is going to be portrayed. It's not going to be, I was a bad boy and I did a terrible thing. It's more likely, you know, I went to jail and
then I had counseling and I'm all better now.
That's right. And I was young, and I was drunk, and I was
whatever.
Would
it have deterred me at the time that I was in abusive relationships? Probably not, because I had a very Pollyanna-ish approach to this. You know, it won't happen to me, etc., etc. Were I to hear that on a date now, I would run to the farthest hill.
Yeah.
You know, a 1% recovery rate from this kind of violent crime is not enough to prove to me that I'm safe with a man like that.
Right. But your concern is the same that a lot of people have. How do you enforce this? Mary Lou seems to think it can be enforced.
I think that there are a whole range of conditions that get placed on probation, and they have varying degrees of success. I think that there is nothing illegal about this. I don't think there's anything wrong about this. It's the first time we've seen it, so let's watch, let's pay attention, let's see if it works. What is the harm in trying? We haven't done terribly well with anything else so far.
Yeah. What's the harm in trying?
What's the harm in trying?
Yeah. Are his rights really being violated?
There is no harm in trying to fight the war against domestic violence. We're all in agreement there. But in terms of the enforceability of this particular clause, it is extremely problematic. It doesn't say that he must tell women that he's dating that he was convicted and that he was guilty of the offense. It simply says he has to advise the woman of the charges before the court. So can he
so what
put
does
whatever?
That mean?
Can he put
that in English for me?
Can he put whatever twist he wants on it? That's what it means. It means he can say, oh yeah, by the way, I was at one point charged and before the courts on assault bodily harm. This order doesn't even say that he has.
Well, the woman's got half a brain. She's going to say, were you convicted? Did you go to jail? Don't you think?
Sure, she might.
And then he's obliged to tell the truth,
But he's not
right?
obliged. No, he's not obliged by order of this.
He's not obliged to tell the truth?
He's not obliged by this to say, I was convicted and I pled guilty. It says he has to advise of the charges before the court.
But what if he lies?
Would
he get in trouble with his probation officer if he lies?
All the more reason for a registry with his photo.
But the registry issue, Catherine, is separate and apart from the enforceability of this probation order. I mean, we want to ensure that we have a violence-free society, particularly and very importantly in intimate relationships. It's going to ensure safety for women. It will ensure safety and security for men, and for the children that we bring up together. But it's a question of how we go about it.
We are now opening everything for discussion because this a judge in Edmonton has done something quite interesting, and quite frankly, I think the fact that we're saying the guy's name over and over is probably going to do more than him having to tell the dates. But I mean, maybe those are good things.
He might not want to stay in Alberta.
He may not want to come out of jail at all. Let's talk to Joyce, who's calling from Winnipeg. Hi, Joyce.
Hi, great show.
Thanks. What do you think of this ruling?
I think it's totally unrealistic. I think there would be quite a problem to enforce and follow up on a ruling like this. And I also feel that you have to look at the general nature or psychological makeup of a male abuser or any type of abusive person. Generally, they do tend to blame their victims. They do not take responsibility for the fact that their anger was out of control. And they also tend to tell lies, of course have low self-esteem and everything else that goes along with that. And they almost, some of them feel that they had a right to hurt the victim. Now,
well, wouldn't it be good then if somebody was forced to tell the truth?
I really don't feel that you could count on the person telling the truth if they've got this psychological profile in their makeup. And another thing I feel that would be much more, if it could be enforced, again, you have a problem of follow-through. A mandatory anger therapy intense program for the convicted individual, and you know, and follow up on that to make sure that he has completed a certain length of therapy, and during that time, not to even have a relationship with the opposite sex, because then again,
then Karen would be here really arguing about how his rights had been violated if someone was saying he couldn't have a relationship for a year.
Well, the danger there being is as we know, these fellows shouldn't be in a relationship with any female until they've got enough control of themselves, or at least gone through enough to realize that, hey, this isn't the way it goes. You know. And,
if only it was that simple.
Yeah.
If only it was that simple.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, but we're looking at this. I mean, I think there's some value in truth-telling. I mean, and it seems to me that, from what I understand of probation, people have to report fairly regularly, right? Don't they have to go once a week or twice a week or whatever?
It depends on what the probation officer directs. And indeed, that's the same with the anger management that Mr. Johnston has to take. It depends on what the probation officer directs, and that, of course, is going to depend on what's available. You might find out that the amount of anger management Mr. Johnston gets is not very significant, and certainly not enough to deal with the problem. That's where our focus should be.
You may also find out that he only has to report once a month by letter to his probation officer, providing his current address.
But if you've been through this, and I'm a little surprised at the way you're arguing this, because I guess I would think that had I been a victim of abuse, that one of the things that I'd want is to be able to make sure that other women knew what this guy was about. I mean, so I would suspect that the victim in this case thinks this is terrific.
You didn't say you didn't think it was terrific. You think it's fine. You just have questions about its enforceability.
I don't think it goes far enough, and I don't know how successfully it can be enforced. I'm concerned that the
I don't think she thinks it's terrific, Mary Lou.
The constitutional rights of the Statistics Canada reports that 85,000 women went to shelters during a given period of time, and that's only 24% of the actual population that has been abused. And so this is a very, very small victory. And I tend to be a bit of a cynic, and I think that it doesn't go far enough. And in that sense, it annoys me. Because while we're making all this noise about it, we're not making noise about Arlene May, and we're not making noise about all the women that we've put 6 feet underground because of people like this. And I sort of feel like we're putting the spotlight on the wrong things.
I just want you to know that METRAC has intervened in the Arlene May.
Wonderful.
In that inquest.
Okay, we need to explain Arlene May for people across the country.
There's an inquest going on in Ontario right now, similar to the one that was in Manitoba 2 years ago, which looks at the patterns in domestic violence. It's particularly about the murder-suicide. Randy Isles was lovers with Arlene May. He murdered her and suicided right afterwards, which is the typical pattern in intimate femicide
and
cases.
He was married and had another girlfriend.
Right.
And 6 children.
But the difference in the Arlene May case was that she videotaped herself, right? Or the police videotaped her telling her story of what she expected to happen to her.
Yes, and she had tried to prepare her children, and you know, there were many incidents prior to the murder.
But do we want to give up on every batterer?
Absolutely.
I mean, because
in terms of rehabilitation? In
some ways, that's what we're saying. If we're not going to let someone let go, if we're not going to say. I mean, this lawyer is saying that his client is repentant. He's accepting the sentence. He's saying he's accepting the judge's wisdom. He's 21 years old.
I don't think it's the same. It's not the same thing to say that we give up on rehabilitation and we don't think that a sentence and probation terms that have the perpetrator, the offender, concentrate on what happened, take responsibility, and try to address it. I think, though, that we do have to not kid ourselves about the dismal failure of rehabilitation attempts.
There's something that's curious to me. When I look at this order, and I'm going to go back to this order and this particular problem, the judge has ordered 100 hours of community service, but there's no quota on how much anger management he has to get. And I think if we want to look prospectively as a community, that's something we should be embracing and saying, look, if you're going to say that he has to go out and pick up garbage or help with the Beavers at a baseball game for 100 hours and do this type of activity in the community, what should he be doing vis-a-vis anger management? I see it as a resource problem. He only has to take what the probation officer directs and what's available. Why not put a stipulation in there about ensuring that he gets through this much school?
And shouldn't there
this
be
many hours of anger?
And shouldn't there also be recommendations that he doesn't end up as a coach for the Cubs or something like that? I mean, this is not a good thing for a batterer, is it? If you're going to do your community service, do you want to? Well, but that's what's been happening.
They may not set a good example of anger management techniques. Yes.
The Cubs or Beavers might learn to be a little bit angrier when they lose their games.
Should batterers be forced to tell about their history? We'll take more of your calls and your email right after this. You're with Jane Hawtin Live.